Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'll get right into it here. There's a quick post on X that I reposted, I believe, on Friday morning. But I haven't had the chance, of course, to bring it up here on the show, so I'm going to do that now. And again, this is a nice little summary of, I think, what took place regarding Pam Bondi's testimony last week. Again, you can take this with a grain of salt if you'd like, but there's actual picture and video evidence of her actually holding these documents. And then, of course, it was sort of briefly discussed within the hearing itself that the fact that every single congressman and woman had the ability to look at the Epstein files unredacted. And then once they went in and they looked at them, they were being tracked for what they were actually searching for. So this is from a Mr. Poole at Mr. Poole_QQ on X. And they said the following here: Pam Bondi just played the greatest trap in political history, and Congress walked right into it. Yesterday, Attorney General Pam Bondi sat before the House Judiciary Committee standard oversight hearing routine questions. Then she pulled out a document labeled Jayapal Pramila Search History, quote unquote. Of course, Jayapal Pramila is one of the congresswomen, I believe, from Washington State, if I'm not mistaken. Indian lady, Democrat, hard left, full-blown communist. Again, if she went into the Epstein files and was looking around, certainly at the redacted photos and videos and names, etc., her search results were tracked and logged, along with everybody else. Post goes on, it says the room went silent. Here's what happened. The DOJ gave Congress access to the unredacted Epstein files last week. Every member got their own login, their own computer, their own session. What Congress didn't know, the DOJ was tracking every single search. Every name they looked up, every document they opened, every file they downloaded, all of it logged. And Bondi brought the receipts to the hearing. The panic was instant. Representative Jayapal called it, quote, spying on members of Congress, unquote. Representative Raskin accused Bondi of, quote, blatant abuse of power, unquote. And Representative Moskowitz said it was suspicious and inappropriate. They're furious. But here's the question nobody in the media is asking. Why are they so scared of their search history? If you're searching for evidence of crimes against children, you'd be proud of that search history, unless you're not searching for evidence, unless you're searching for your own name. The genius of the trap. Think about it, they said. Bondi didn't just release the files, she released them on monitored computers. Every Congress member who rushed to search the files just told the DOJ exactly who they're trying to protect, what names they're worried about, which connections they're trying to verify. The ones searching for flights to the island, quote unquote, equal investigators. The ones searching for specific names equal protectors. Bondi now knows who's investigating and who's covering up. And she showed them she knows, in front of cameras with a smile. The DHS shutdown, perfect timing. While Congress panics about their search history, DHS is shutting down Saturday. Democrats blocked the funding bill. House members already left Washington. The same week Congress gets caught searching Epstein files, they refuse to fund the department that investigates trafficking. They're not defunding DHS to save money. They're defunding it to stop investigations. Connect the dots. On last Monday, Congress gets Epstein file access. On Tuesday, members frantically search for names. On Wednesday, Bondi reveals she's tracked everything. On Thursday, Democrats block DHS funding, and on Friday, government shutdown begins. 5 days, one pattern, panic. They walked right into the hearing thinking they were in control. They walked out knowing Bondi has everything. Every search, every name, every cover-up attempt. Logged, documented, weaponized. The hunter became the hunted, and they did it to themselves, dark to light, unquote. Again, you can see her with the folders in front of her, and she, again, has every single congressman and woman and what they were specifically looking up. Again, they took screenshots of this up close, certainly the photographers did, and then those pictures, of course, made their way onto the internet, and there you have it. So yeah, it's rather incriminating. Again, if you're interested in an actual investigation, you're going to be wanting to look at everything, not a specified singular thing, unless, of course, you're interested in looking up yourself, or you're interested in tipping off somebody else that you, of course, have an affiliation with, and letting them know for a certain amount of money, hey, look, you're in these files, you'd better do XYZ to protect yourself and blah, blah, blah. Again, they're running cover for a great deal of people, but I'm not sure it's Bondi running cover. It's certainly congressmen and women who are deeply involved in this, and we know, of course, where they got their money. You already have Democrat from New York, Hakeem Jeffries. He specifically had his entire staff reach out to Epstein for his re-election campaign to see if he would donate money to it. There's no way that he was the only one. And again, a lot of this PAC money gets laundered through the Israeli lobby, whether people know it or not. I saw a big long thread having to do with some money that makes its way to Thomas Massie. While he might not be, again, receiving money directly from AIPAC, it doesn't mean that he's not receiving money from subsidiaries of AIPAC at a more local level, certainly within the state of Kentucky. But who's to say? Now, I'm going to bounce around a little bit here, but of course, I'm going to get back to Epstein as well, because some of these documents, again, are being dug through even more. Of course, there were millions of them, so it's not like everybody got to them within the first week or anything, or within the first 2 weeks. But either way, election fraud, of course, is always at the forefront here. And there's a lot of chatter online basically implicating Stacey Abrams, as we all knew, certainly within Georgia, as being one of the individuals, of course, who was receiving copious amounts of money to, of course, hijack elections and then launder the money through her or through her affiliates or associates or whatever down to a local level. And then those individuals, of course, would run ballots numerous times through tabulators and the whole thing. Again, the voter fraud thing is I would say satisfying, to say the least, for all of us, certainly back in 2020 and even earlier than that, but definitely the year of 2020 when we could see all of this transpiring and actually occurring on purpose for a very specific reason. Again, the impeachment, the COVID lie, and then all of that, the protests, the quote-unquote summer of love, as unfortunately people call it, the burning of buildings, the Black Lives Matter nonsense. All of that, again, was a color revolution for the purpose of stealing the 2020 election. Best part is the good guys let it happen. They let it happen to catch the bad guys, and it worked. Not to mention, and I've said it here on the show, and you know this as well, if you pick up one of those local, small town, or even downtown Atlanta, whatever, vote counters, or tabulator managers, or whatever particular position these people had. If you grab one of them and you pull them into an interrogation room and you so much as just squeeze with 2 of your fingers, you don't even need your hand around their throat. If you just pinch them just a little bit, they'll give up the entire goose. They'll give up everybody. I think I'm going to get her name right. Remember the gal Ruby Friedman, I think her name was? I could be butchering that, but Ruby was one of her names, or her first name. She was one of these black women, again, who's wearing the mask, and they thought that wearing the masks during the vote counting was going to somehow protect them or hide their identity. That turned out to not be true. Again, these individuals have probably talked to, again, the federal government. Because the federal government, of course, it being a federal election, has jurisdiction over anybody at the state level. So, as we saw back in 2020, and certainly the latter half and early half of 2021, anybody at the local and state level can basically wash their hands clean of it, so they think, but the stains still remain, because they're saying things like, well, we're not going to touch it because Joe Biden's president now, and that's his purview, and we don't want to get involved and whatever else. Every single state has the constitutional authority to make sure that their elections are sound and secure and done correctly. Of course, we know how corruption works, and if they're all bought off, which theoretically they were, then they're just going to let it go through and they're not going to raise a fuss over anything. But with Stacey Abrams always at the forefront and everybody always asking the question, where in the hell did she even come from? This is the fun part about criminals, that they just don't seem to understand. That there's 2 aspects that draw individuals directly into illegality at face value and allow, again, a layperson to be able to see who the criminal is. 2 ways, I think, anyway. There's the grooming way, which is sort of the nepotistic, you've always been here, you've always been around, you're not going away kind of corrupt person, like Gavin Newsom, for example, who's been around for a very long time, well connected to all the wrong people, guilt by association, et cetera, et cetera. But then you also have a Stacey Abrams on the other side of that spectrum, who came out of nowhere. No one knows who she's related to. No one knows any job she's ever had. She just shows up, quite literally out of thin air. And then she's on television, and then she's telling everybody what they should do and what's going to happen and how things need to be and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, she's running for governor. And she's running for, again, political office. And no one's ever even heard of her. She has no resume to speak of. She's just loud, plays the race card. If you don't like me, it's because you're racist. And then she gets a bunch of loud racists behind her to push her and basically support her as much as humanly possible, knowing full well that somebody's going to get a favor in return, or certainly a check under the table. But if you think about it, specifically regarding Stacey Abrams, we haven't seen her in quite some time, have we? We haven't heard from her in quite some time. She has to be being followed by the federal government. You know, the military has, again, all of her technology at their disposal. They can track her. They know right where she is. Who's to say they haven't picked her up? And who's to say that they haven't squeezed her? Again, in moments like this, it's like any interrogation. But if you think of the movie Sicario with Benicio del Toro, it's basically like that. You pull the person into a room, you detain them because you can lawfully detain them because you have evidence to detain them. It's not like any of that evidence or any of the warrants or whatever have to be public. If it's a military operation, you would do this as quietly as humanly possible. And you'd pull her into a room. And you would sit her down, and she'd be sitting at a table by herself, and she'd say, well, what's all this about? And yeah, she could have a lawyer, I suppose, present if she wanted to. But either way, you push the evidence right in front of her, and you say, okay, so here's what you did, here's the amount of money you received, and here's the result. Here's what ended up happening as a result of that campaign or that election or whatever. Here's who you were communicating with. We have all of this. You're going down. Now, tell us what we want to know. Where did it all start? Who else is involved? Show us the entire Venn diagram of all of the people that you were communicating with and then who those people were communicating with, et cetera, et cetera. And you're talking about a spider web of a Venn diagram that probably looks massive. It would cover an entire wall, and that's putting it mildly. Here's Joe Lang over on X, and he said the following. Who has been telling you that Stacey Abrams is at the center of the stolen election in 2020? FBI raid on Fulton County Election Office to kick off the massive public exposure of DOJ/intelligence community investigations. Exposure now coming from Maricopa County. Philadelphia is likely next. Do you think the timing of Trump mentioning Stacey Abrams yesterday is just a coincidence? No coincidences, pain. And in a speech about Abrams tanks, Trump said the following, quote, we're also purchasing 30 new and modified Abrams tanks. Was named in honor of Stacey Abrams. Only a few political people would understand that. Congratulations. Thank you very much for a great name, Stacey, unquote. Again, it could be a slip of the tongue. Or does the guy know exactly what's going on? He knows what's going on because he's being told by the people who are actually doing the investigation. If timing is everything, which it certainly is, I don't think the timing could be any more perfect. Again, think about all of the things that Donald Trump has said regarding the 250th anniversary of our country and how it's going to be the best anniversary ever. And America, again, is coming back, and there's going to be an economic boom, and all of this stuff. We know that what motivates Americans, specifically Americans, is accountability of people in the highest ranking offices. And given the fact that it's the 250th anniversary, when you combine that with ongoing investigations into pedophiles of high ranking, again, celebrity individuals, politicians, et cetera, and then you have individuals again being investigated for voter fraud, who are probably and have probably already been detained. They've certainly been questioned. And then again, copious amounts of information has already trickled out here. I don't think that you make that raid on the Fulton County Elections Office. Of course, you can't make a raid like that unless you have a very specific search warrant that clearly shows a judge who, of course, signs off on the search warrant, or the confiscation warrant, we'll call it, what exactly exists there or what does not exist there that should exist there. And they've already found, of course, there's missing boxes. There's missing ballots. So that's clearly a problem. Anybody thinks that Fulton County, Georgia is the only place where that occurred? Well, I have a bridge I'd like to sell you, because there's no way that that was the only place, and there's no way that was the only case. But when you combine that also with the discussions of an economic boom and things turning around economically, and Americans are going to be wealthier than ever before, as Donald Trump has consistently said, and certainly said during his campaign, and even back again during the first campaign, you can see what's happening here. The amount of money that's coming back into the United States is massive. We've been told that we're going to be receiving a tax rebate or a tax rebate check or something along those lines. Some people might refer to them as a stimulus check. I don't think it's going to have that kind of a name affiliated with it anymore. It's not a stimulus check. It's your own money that you're getting back that was being stolen. And again, we've been told that that's going to happen. Certainly within, I believe, last I heard, it was within the first quarter of the year. Again, don't quote me on that. That was just Secretary Bessent saying that a while back. Certainly he said it last year. He said, I would expect those checks to go out within the first quarter of 2026. Well, if people have more money in their pockets, then they're likely to either get out of debt, invest it, or spend it. All of which are fantastic. All of which the Jewish lobby cannot stand. All of which the bankers cannot stand. So as they're making a silver run on the banks, and Americans are getting their own fraudulent money returned back to them in the form of a check, or stolen money, I should say. It's been stolen from all of us, so that's why we would be getting it back. Then it's going to put the banks back up against a wall. I mean, they're going to be in deep, deep trouble. On top of that, I don't believe. I mean, who's to say really? I think the public was led to believe something like $2,000 checks were going to go out to the public, something along those lines. Who's to say it's only going to be $2,000? If you really want to stimulate the economy, you give back every tax-paying American $5-10 grand plus. Certainly, if you're receiving as much money back from tariffs as we've been receiving, that would really stimulate the economy, because not only would people be able to get out of debt and invest, they would be able to do the third, which is spend. Or the fourth, which is even better, which is save. I mean, if they can do all four of those things with a hefty check back from the government that theoretically is their own stolen money to begin with, you talk about a 250th anniversary that's worth a celebration. And then you combine even that with arrests, like from Barack Obama, who was running point on this whole damn thing. That's one beautiful Independence Day present as far as I'm concerned. But what we're seeing, certainly I believe right now, and I'm not the only one that shares this, is that what we're seeing is the constant drip of this information, so much so that no one can stop this. Again, they can scream, yell, shout, they can panic, they can resign. Lots of people are resigning even now with their direct ties to Epstein files and numerous other things. They're just not running for office again. Again, they're leaving their CEO positions, they're quitting their jobs, whatever it is. You have university professors, for example, quitting their jobs. There was a UCLA professor, I believe, last week who quit his job. Dude looks super Jewish. And he was having conversations with Epstein about God knows what. Probably nothing good. It's impossible to deny the amount of things that are moving very, very quickly And there's no way that they would be moving this quickly if there wasn't a plan in place. And if that plan and those parameters were not being followed to a T. It is most certainly a military operation. So yeah, I mean, even myself, I have to sit back and relax just occasionally from time to time and smile and know that this is being handled appropriately. Yes, it's not happening as fast as we'd like. Yes, everybody's calling for public executions. But at the same time, you have to release documents to the Anons, like you, like me, like anybody else. We have to be able to use our platforms to get the messages out there so that people can see this. And then they have to take the next step in moving that material on to the unknowledgeable and moving that material on to the people who don't want to see it. But even so, if those people who are not awake don't want to see it, it won't matter. Because what's going to happen here in the future is an inevitability. And again, there will be mass arrests. People are going to be arrested. This is going to happen. It was mentioned in Q posts consistently. I've read the posts on the show here before. And one of the posts, again, is very poignant, and it goes something to the effect of, you don't believe that there won't be any accountability given these level of crimes, do you? You don't think that we're going to all of this trouble and to do all of this with there not being public accountability? Again, there has to be. And I think, again, that we are seeing exactly what lies ahead, certainly when it comes to looking at a particular individual and saying that person is still alive, that person is going to be arrested, that person, of course, is going to be detained, and the public is going to see it. If the public reacts negatively to a horrible person being arrested, then what you do, of course, then is you force the hand of the media, which if the media is controlled through executive order, which it's been stated that it is, then you force their hand to cover particular subjects as much as humanly possible. We know again, regarding the Guthrie thing and that whole fake kidnapping, we know that that's being used as a distraction method, but that's because there are still people within the media who are not controlled. There are still bad people pulling strings, whether they again be the actual CEOs themselves or some of the people who are the directors and producers of particular stories, or the person behind the switchboard who says, no, stay on this story. We're not talking about Epstein. We're still talking about Nancy Guthrie and blah, blah, blah. Those people still exist because there's still a civil war going on within all of these agencies. Not to mention, let's face it, the people who work as news readers, the people that you see on a television, those individuals are brainwashed as all get out. It's not all of them, but it's certainly the vast majority. I don't think that they're all awake, and I don't think that they're all actors. They're really on there being stupid because they are dumb, because you can just see what questions they don't ask and everything else. Again, a thinking person would say, why are we spending so much time on Savannah Guthrie's mother? Again, these are horrible human beings. These are bad people. I even saw a story that had something to do with, what was it? It was basically saying that the entire time that Savannah Guthrie's been off of the Today Show ratings have dramatically increased when she was away on medical leave. And so she's doing this along with other deep state players in an effort to basically make her look relevant and bring her back to television as an empathetic or sympathetic victim of a crime or whatever else. I think the cooler part would be to take that entire story and flip it on its ear and expose it as being a psychological operation that's a false flag that wasn't real, that the entire thing was just a damn hoax. Because then you've got what? You've got the media wrapped up and going along with the hoax. If you watch even like 5 to 10 minutes of them covering that stupid story, you'll see them start to backtrack on things that they've previously reported. Well, why is it that the police are doing this all of a sudden? And why is that happening all of a sudden? And this seems strange and blah, blah, blah. And this has never happened before, they'll say. Why is there no caution tape? Why is there a tent over the front door? Well, they're taking down the tent. Why is it that there's more police officers at Savannah Guthrie's sister's house now? That's never happened before, and whatever else. Again, the absurdity of it is for distraction purposes. That's because the truth is never going to be spoon-fed to people. You have to go find it. However, this is why it wraps all the way back to Epstein and why it wraps all the way back to voter fraud. Because I think all of this is in the same basket. If you can spoon-feed the public Savannah Guthrie for 3 weeks, we're entering the 3rd week of this blah, 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 this saga of, good God, where is this person? There are missing children and missing people everywhere. But they're honing in on this. And if you can serve the public this one, imagine what you can force feed an asleep public when it comes to the actual truth. When it comes to child sacrifice. When it comes to, again, satanic rituals. Raping, mutilating, abusing children, draining their blood, adrenochrome, right up to voter fraud, and any other subject you want. Crushing Hollywood, crushing these so-called celebrities. Again, guilt by association is going to take down a great deal of people too, because once you arrest some of these high-profile individuals, well, all of a sudden that individual isn't going to have many friends anymore. But then an awake public is going to look at those people who affiliated with them and say, wait a minute, did you know anything about this? And then it puts them on their heels, and then they have to consistently say, well, I didn't know anything about this. No, I didn't know that they were sexually grooming people to be raped and trafficked and blah, blah, blah. I didn't participate in any satanic ritual of any kind. Again, the lights and the cameras will be on them for the first time in the worst possible way. It'll make that Ricky Gervais thing at the Golden Globes look like a cakewalk. No chance. It's going to get way worse for these people. There's too much information out there. Let me read this very quickly too. This is from the Epstein files, and it's horrific. This is from a Marsh law firm, PLLC, out of New York, and it was dated November 10th of 2020. And this is from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Audrey Strauss, Esquire. Southern District of New York, again, New York, New York. And this is a 9-page document titled Information about Possible Childhood Sexual Abuse by Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, there's a lot of names in this particular document here. And what I've done is I've linked it in my most recent Substack article. It's titled We're Living in Hell. A Chanboard post from the past and the enemy we've always been fighting. And what I do first is I just kind of get into this particular 9-page document by just highlighting one particular page. But again, I link all 9 pages if you're interested in taking a look at it. And then I wrap it up with the Chanboard post, which again specifically has to do with satanic Jews back in Poland sacrificing children. And it was the German SS police who came across these individuals and was hunting these individuals to find these individuals to rescue children, and then, of course, hold the guilty accountable, which they did in many cases. But that was the enemy back then. That's been the enemy since the beginning of time, and we're still fighting that enemy. So it's getting to a point again where you can even see, of course, the enemy panicking. That's why they're screaming anti-Semitism at the top of their lungs. Well, you're just anti-Semitic. You're just anti-Semitic. No. I'm a pattern recognizer, and I know history. I know real history. That's what this is about. Is it all of them? No, because it can't be. That's impossible. But it's plenty, and it's certainly the ones in these higher ranking positions. But again, this 9-page document is terrifying, and there's a particular testimony. The whole thing is a testimony. Again, they name names, they name locations. And again, there's sort of screenshots of particular pictures and buildings and Google images and locations, certainly Epstein's mansion in New York City, and then whatever, other photographs of other individuals. And then a lot of it, of course, is redacted, but there's a particular portion that I want to read here because, again, this exemplifies the level of evil that we're up against. These people are satanic, and we are not them. But we have to call them out for who they are. And yes, if the vast majority happen to be Jewish, well, then that's a problem. And they certainly are. Again, Jeffrey Epstein didn't want Whoopi Goldberg flying on his jet when she was begging for it at the last moment to go to some charity event because he doesn't like blacks. Okay. But he doesn't like anybody who's not Jewish. And she's not Jewish. So here's what it says on page 7, which is the page that I highlight again in the Substack article, rather. And again, this is heavily redacted. It says there's a blacked out picture at the top. It says blank has an additional image showing part of Mike's face, this time visibly participating in abusing blank. Together, the two partial images of Mike's face may help identify him. It says last year, in addition to sending blank images, blank stated that Mike told blank that her foster mother Sheila was going to come to Israel and would take blank to a nice family, quote unquote. Blank did not believe that would be nice at all. While media stories have stated rather that Epstein and Maxwell's victims were mostly teenagers, there is evidence that suggests that they also abused younger girls. Jean-Luc Brunel reportedly provided Epstein a birthday gift of 12-year-old triplets. Epstein's victims, blank, stated in the Netflix documentary Who Killed Jeffrey Epstein, Episode 2, that when she worked as a receptionist at the NYC mansion in about 1995, quote, many girls, little girls, were always going in and out, quote unquote. A phone message slip referred to Russian lessons from, quote, 2 by 8-year-olds, unquote, and blank, in an expose from Australian television, said that Epstein sought girls, the younger the better. It says blank images presumably could be shown to other Epstein-Maxwell victims to see if they remember her. It is our understanding that the Epstein NYC mansion blank was, and then it says referred to as blank. And then in the middle, in the footnote, it says the following, and this is the worst part. It says the photo shows, which is redacted, a girl, her face visible, who looks prepubescent, with medium-length dark hair. Several Caucasian men are holding the girl's legs spread open. Her vagina is visible and gashed, and there is blood coming out. In the photo's foreground, a man with a white shirt appears to be inserting his hand or something into her vagina. A round imprinted symbol of some kind is visible on the girl's leg, on the underside of her left thigh. In the photo's right-hand corner, there is an arm with a green shirt visible. An arm holds the girl's knee in the air. In the photo's left foreground, there is a profile of a man with long sideburns, a beard, and a small bald spot on his head. In the photo's background on the left, there appears to be the unclothed top torso of a man. A man with what appears to be a black t-shirt and a blue shirt appears on the left of the girl's face. On the photo's lower left, there is a green structure, which is hard to identify. The girl's mouth looks bloody, and her tongue is extended. There is a bruise under her left eye and a red mark on the left side of her neck. Her left shin is bleeding, and there are purplish bruises on her abdomen, recalls the actions taking place in this additional image. Again, it goes on and on and on. A lot of Hebrew texts back and forth, and it was signed off by sincerely Jennifer Freeman, carbon copied Dr. Joanna Silberg, Stephen Sauer, Mike Full of Love, and Noel Engels. Again, all Jewish. Either way, this was clearly the testimony and investigation having to do with at least a certain set of circumstances, and then basically them saying, okay, since we're still investigating this and we're going to keep investigating this, let's see if we can move some of these images to other witnesses who we've worked with and see if they can identify particular people and if they can verify these kinds of practices and whatever. I would simply say this, that again, we don't hate the enemy enough. We can't possibly hate them enough. One person on Great Awakening wrote this, and again, they're kind of, I don't know, they're splitting hairs here a little bit. I'm not entirely sure it matters, but I see where they're coming from. Again, we know who's really responsible for all of this. We know that it's Jewish. We know it's satanic. We know it's Mossad. We know it's Israel. We know it's all of that. Khazarian mafia, however you want to shape. And then, of course, endless other individuals who are affiliated with all of these groups. But they said the following, quote, "We lost a huge opportunity in the Great Awakening's movement by naming them Epstein files, quote unquote, instead of Mossad honeypot files." Well, again, you need a figurehead rather than an entity, I think. And you need a figurehead that people can hone in on, and then you can go outside of that figurehead, and then you can start to look at other entities, and then you can start to look at who's affiliated with those entities outside of a particular singular person. But again, I mean, I understand what they're saying, but either way, they went on here. They said, "Fellow patriots, as a former CIA case officer who has long exposed the deep state's pedophilia networks and foreign intelligence blackmail operations, I must speak plainly. We squandered a golden opportunity with these so-called Epstein files. By focusing on the fall guy, the asset Jeffrey Epstein, we shielded the true masters pulling the strings, Mossad and their Zionist agenda of compromise and control over our elites. This was no mere sex trafficking ring. It was a sophisticated honeypot designed to ensnare politicians, judges, billionaires, and media figures, ensuring perpetual loyalty to a foreign power over America first." I'm going to intervene real quick, and I would say it's about even more than that. It's about perpetuating Satanism. Yes, there was blackmail involved. Yes, there were honeypots set up. Yes, it was information acquisition and trading information and sex for information and human beings for information and money and so on and so on. But it was satanic, which means it doesn't have to be organized, and it doesn't even have to be coherent. It doesn't have to make sense, because Satan doesn't make sense. He's all over the place. He can be as evil as he wants to be regarding 1,000 different things, and they don't necessarily have to connect other than the fact that they're all evil. The description that I just read about this girl being tortured, what does that have to do with blackmail? Nothing. That's just satanic torture for the purposes of maiming and murdering somebody while raping them. Again, this is the kind of stuff that has to hit the mainstream. It doesn't matter what it's titled, just as long as people understand that this is what's going on in the world and has since the beginning of time. They went on, they said, quote, "Had we branded these revelations, the Mossad honeypot files, from the outset, the Great Awakening would have surged forward with unstoppable force. The public would have seen beyond the patsy to the organization and agenda behind him." Well, we already can see it now. Endless people can see it. Even the blind can see it now. And then they said, "Awakening millions to the foreign subversion embedded in our highest levels. Instead, we allowed controlled opposition to dilute the truth. Wake up, Anons. The real fight is against the handlers, not just the handled. The storm is coming, but only if we name the enemy correctly." Yeah, I agree with that, and that's what everybody's been doing. It's almost as if this so-called former CIA case officer is a bit late to the party, because again, people have taken over X with the truth. They're calling out the Jewish lobby, Mossad. Gab has been doing that as a social media platform since its inception. And now X is taken over. It's unavoidable. You have individuals, again, even on Rumble, with massive Rumble audiences, massive Rumble shows calling out, again, Israel, Mossad, satanic Jews, etc., just like Clay Morris and his wife over on Redacted. He brings it up consistently because it's unavoidable. Harrison Smith's 14-minute mashup clip, little short documentary there of, again, all of them saying what they want to do to us, how they want to control what we say. Only the enemy would say such a thing. Only the guilty of the most heinous crimes on earth would ever say such a thing, that criticizing them should somehow be against the law. So I don't think it matters what we call the Epstein files, so to speak. We know what it is really. It's Satanism. It's ancient, ritualistic Satanism, which involves, again, everything that I've brought up here, all of it. And money laundering is the least of it. I mean, fraud's bad, don't get me wrong, but the worst of it is the actual individualistic torture, kidnapping, rape, murder, and then that being done over and over and over again, and the procurement of bodies for these individuals to do what they want with. That's what has to stop. That has to be the constant military operation that we go after both within our own country and then everywhere. ICE apparently just pulled out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'll give you a brief example. Tom Homan gave a speech the other day, and he said, "We rescued over 3,200 missing children," meaning we found over 3,200 plus missing children in Minneapolis alone. While everybody was going to work, everybody was going to restaurants, people were getting drunk and stupid, wasting their money, wasting their time. They're walking past buildings that have kidnapped children in them, and they don't even know it. You have people protesting the actions of ICE in middle schools, high schools, elementary schools, preschools, school teachers, the very people that you think are supposed to protect children, which clearly they don't, and their actions over the last God knows how many months here have proven that the protection of children is something that they don't give a shit about. Because if they did, they wouldn't be protesting anything. They'd be keeping their stupid fat mouths shut about all of this, knowing full well that children who have been sold into sex slavery and stolen from their families via CPS and endless other organizations, just child traffickers in general, that if they knew that any of that was going on, or they were particularly a part of it, they wouldn't be screaming at the top of their lungs, "Fuck ICE" and "F this" and "F that." They wouldn't be doing any of that. But now they're all eating crow. Certainly a great deal of them. Again, in the town where I live, we had a nitwit last month who is a middle school teacher. I believe an English middle school teacher. I think her name is Katie Bowers. She's not intelligent, this woman, and it's sad. It's sad that she's just not bright. But she comes up to city council and she says, "I don't represent the school district. I don't represent the building. I don't represent the profession. I'm just speaking about myself, and I'm just suggesting a particular thing that city council consider." And she basically said again that Cincinnati's city council in Cincinnati, Ohio, put forth some resolution to try to keep ICE out of their city. But what is ICE doing? They're arresting criminals and they're rescuing children. So this is a mother of two who's a school teacher who's encouraging a small college town city council to create a resolution to keep ICE out of here. She doesn't think pedophiles exist, apparently. She might not even know that there are probably kidnapped children in the very town where I live. Shit, there might be. There's no way that I know that. Which means, how would she know? She wouldn't. But if ICE rolled through our town and started knocking on doors and finding kidnapped kids, would that surprise me? Not in the fucking slightest. But when you have school teachers advocating for the government to not enforce the law that's actually rescuing children, do you think your children are safe in American schools? You must be on drugs. A person has to be on full-blown drugs to believe that their children are safe in American schools. When you have people like that working as a school teacher, advocating for law breaking and skirting the law, I'm telling you, I don't know what happened. I don't know. I mean, I know it's brainwashing. And sorry for cursing in this episode, but this is the kind of stuff that gets me riled up. This is the kind of thing that is right in front of everybody's face. It can't get more obvious. It can't get more obvious who your enemy is. Yes, it's foreign. Yes, it's national. Yeah, it's domestic. And it's right here in your own town, in your own city where you live. With anybody, again, advocating for this level of illegality by trying to keep law enforcers out who are rescuing kids. There are endless videos out there, too, of ICE agents approaching these automobiles being driven by these whack job leftist females, waving dildos in the air. I mean, they're throwing dildos at ICE agents. That's your ally? People who are protesting ICE agents with rubber cocks in their hands. What is happening? What is going on? Throwing them at automobiles, sticking them on roofs, doing whatever they're doing. And these ICE agents will park. And they'll get out of their automobiles and they'll walk up to the automobile of the person who's following them. Again, usually some whack job female leftist. And they'll say, "Why are you following us? Stop following us." And then they'll get their license plate and they'll even drive to the leftist's home. And then they'll get out of their automobile and they'll say, we gave you a federal agent security drive home. And now you're home, so now you can park here and you need to stop following us. And then the leftists start screaming and yelling. And they say, "If I want to follow you, I'll follow you because I don't like what you're doing." And then another ICE agent came up to this one woman, again in this video, and he says, "We are following and investigating and tracking down a child trafficker and a rapist who might have children in their possession that don't belong to them. That's what we're doing. And you're impeding that right now." And then in their own delusion, of course, they, "Well, whatever, you don't know that that's what you're doing, and how do I know that?" And blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay. It isn't the Wild West. The ICE agents aren't just running around doing whatever they want. They have orders. They have people they're going after. Now, how did they get all these people's names? Simple. Military intelligence. These illegals have been tracked. They have phones. They have debit cards. They use them. They were given places to live, for Christ's sake. We know where they live. But you have American school teachers keeping people like this, attempting to keep people like that on the streets who are engaging in crimes against humanity against children. They're the dumbest people on the face of the planet. The people who are advocating, again, for these kids to not be saved. Not knowing a single thing. And you know it's brainwashing because they don't even know that that's what's happening. And I wish, again, that would be the part that would be blasted all over the media with more regularity, but of course it isn't. The number of children that are actually being saved and lost children that are being reunited with their actual American families and even foreign families because they've been sold. Now, it's possible that the parents, again, sold them. But even so, if that's the case, I'm sure certain authorities will be able to figure that out. And then again, if they have to become children of the state, it's not like that's any better necessarily, but at least they might have a chance. But it's a little difficult when you've got dumbass liberal school teachers screaming at the top of their lungs to encourage their own students to then protest the enforcement of crimes against humanity. It's, again, I don't know how anybody could possibly work in the education business and have a conscience. You have to be void of a conscience to work in the business these days. And I think it's always going to be that way from here on out. The Rubicon has been passed here. That ship has sailed, the die has been cast. These people have defined themselves in the blink of an eye. Now, with that said, let me get to this story and a little background on this, along with some audio to play from some news outlets across the nation here. This specifically has to do with Lifetouch. And I didn't talk about this last week because I wanted to gather more information and see where the chips all fell regarding this particular subject. But Lifetouch was one of the major and is one of the major American K-12 school, certainly public school, but it's also private and charter, photograph companies that, of course, provide school pictures, athletic photos, club photos, et cetera, that are then sold to schools to then, of course, use within yearbooks. Now, I want to opine on just a couple of things before I get into the specifics of some of this and how this has all basically transpired, certainly over the recent weeks regarding the Epstein files and a Leon Black specifically being affiliated with Jeffrey Epstein, who again was the executive of Apollo Global Management, which owns Lifetouch through its acquisition of Shutterfly in 2019. So here's my opining on this first. First of all, why have a yearbook to begin with? What's the point? I mean, I make fun of the school system with regularity, but the tradition of having some kind of a yearbook to begin with at this point is absurd. Because that in itself, in my opinion, is a device and a ritual that is designed to brainwash individuals into believing that that time of their lives is the best ever and it'll never get any better than that. Look at all of your peers and look at all of this collectivism and look at all of this communism and look how everybody's dressed the same in these photographs by and large. And the more popular students are the ones that are in clubs and have particular affiliations and blah, blah, blah. It's all designed, again, to divide, demean, and demoralize. That's really the point. It's not really to increase the intelligence of anybody within any kind of a school building. That isn't it. It's fake. I'll just put it that way. It's completely fake. Now, with that aside, when you get more specifically into the business of school photographs, if you remember back when you were in school, and of course I attended public school and then was a public school teacher for 9 years, I remember not taking the school photos seriously in the slightest. I hated them when I was a student. I couldn't stand them. The best school photo I ever took was my kindergarten picture. I think that photo is awesome. It'd make a hilarious t-shirt. And like I said, the children's book that I put together is based off of that photograph. It's funny, because when everybody's in kindergarten, it's kind of a funny picture. But even so, after that, you see, a person growing up and getting older and whatever else, and you can see time changing, of course, and then you can see the attitude. Certainly in my school photos, you can see my attitude on my face shift because I can't stand the schooling experience. And then you can see it on my face in the photograph. Whereas, the other person takes it seriously and dresses up for picture day, quote unquote, which it's still called that today. And then again, you can either have your photos redone or whatever. But if you're not there for picture day, this is where they really clamp down in the school business. And they send you constant reminders. Well, Billy and Sally, you weren't here for picture day. So you need to get your pictures taken. You don't need to buy them, but we need to take a picture of you anyway and put it in the yearbook. It's practically unavoidable, and they make it so. They make it very difficult for you to avoid having your picture taken and having your picture in a yearbook forever. Now, again, if you think about it, it is a FERPA violation because you're putting children's faces and images in a book that theoretically anybody can purchase. I know that they always say, well, it's only offered to the parents and the students and the staff members who work in the building and whatever else. But think about it. You can buy multiple copies of those books. You can sell copies or give copies to sexual predators. They can find children. They can find their names, addresses, phone numbers, everything online. They have a picture of the minor, and then they can go get them. It doesn't seem safe because it's not even theory. It just doesn't seem safe because it's never seemed safe. So when I taught school, I hated picture day as a school teacher and I avoided it. I worked my ass off to avoid it, actually. In fact, some of the years I was never even in the book. There may have been 1 or 2 years when I was, and then I remember one year as a joke, because I was mocking the whole picture day thing, I had a hand puppet that was a firefighter. And I had the photographer, take a picture of the hand puppet that I had that was a firefighter, and I said, just use this as my photograph. And they were like, well, I can't do that. It's got to be you, and we need you in the photo. And I went, no, we're not doing that. I said, take a picture of this puppet, and then if you want that to go in the yearbook, then that'll go in the yearbook. And they actually did it because I fought them on it. And I said, I don't want my face in the yearbook. Just put a picture of this puppet with a huge mustache. It was ridiculous. But again, I was mocking the whole thing. It was a joke. Unfortunately, there were some people, again, who worked in the building who didn't think it was funny. Well, too bad for them. They took things too seriously. A couple of friends of mine thought it was hilarious. They were like, yeah, man, we know you don't like picture day and that you're not a fan of it. So, this is hilarious and you're sticking it to the man and whatever else. And I was like, yeah, thanks. It's funny. But then it got to a point where they were like, no, we can't do that. We have to use your actual photograph. At which point I would tell them, just tell them to use my photograph from years ago that they already used then. And then they would do that. They would just reuse the same photograph. But they even hated that too. So then I went over to the high school in the same school district where I was working in Southwest Florida. And picture day rolled around. And I said, F it, I'm not participating. So I didn't go. Then they run the announcements over the PA system. It's repetitive all the time. Any staff members or students who haven't had your picture taken, make sure you come down during this time and have your picture taken. And I would leave the building. At the end of the day, instead of going and getting my photo or getting it during lunch or wherever, I would just leave. Or I would just stay in my room and continue teaching, and that would be that. And then one particular day, which was, ridiculous, somebody came around, and I don't know if it was a union representative for the building or whoever it was, and I wasn't a member of the union. But they came by and they were like, so we noticed that your photograph isn't in the yearbook, and you didn't take pictures with the yearbook company, which was Lifetouch at the time. Again, creepy name, Lifetouch. Think about that for a second. And then at the exact same time, they were like, but we need your picture in the yearbook, and it's not going to cost you anything or whatever else. And they had a camera in their hands. And I said, if you're going to take a picture of me, then just take a picture of me now. And I was just sitting at a chair, and that was it. And they just took a quick photo, and then they ran off, and that was it. And I believe at the time, they were responsible for putting the yearbook together or something. It was stupid. Because again, there's always that section where it says, people not photographed, and then it would list their names, whether they be students or staff. I always thought that was creepy too. Because, it was like, these are the people who don't want their pictures taken. So we need to make fun of them, or we need to hunt them down and ask why they don't like their pictures being taken. My point is that the entire experience is a bit harassing in a very odd way. But that's also the environment. And that's the behavior of the people who exist within the environment. It is conformity. You will conform or else. We will ostracize you. Even when it comes to something as stupid and superficial as yearbook pictures. Again, that's the absurdity of all of this. So here's where this stretches out. And again, this has to do specifically with Jeffrey Epstein, his connections with Leon Black, and then, of course, his connections from a business standpoint and what he's in charge of. Now again, you can play 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon if you'd like, or you can play 2 degrees of Jeffrey Epstein, and it falls right in the lap of the American school system. Does that shock anyone, really? In fact, before I get into this timeline here, which was put together by ChatGPT having to do with some of these associations, and I'm not saying, of course, that this is an apt summary of everything that actually exists. It certainly isn't. But I do want to mention this from a technological standpoint. There was a time, of course, when these school photographs were not wireless, where cameras themselves were not wireless devices, that they weren't attached to a cloud, which, as we all know, is just someone else's computer. There's a SIM card in these cameras, a picture is taken, it's instantly digitized, it's instantly uploaded onto the internet, again, their own servers, so they say, which anyone can control. And it's all done wirelessly, just through the air, as all of this just, again, flies right through the air, right in front of everybody's faces. There's absolutely no reason why anybody couldn't, certainly any kind of a hacker, and it doesn't even have to be a hacker. It can just be somebody off of the books who snatches those photos in sort of the intermediary standpoint between the photograph being shot from the camera to the server at a Lifetouch location. Who's to say that that photo can't be grabbed? Who's to say that that photo can't be grabbed with their name immediately affiliated with it? Because if you recall, if you've ever participated in a picture day, you have to walk up to the photographer with money in an envelope or no money in the envelope, with your order on it, your first and last name, your address, or whatever, certainly first and last name, and then you hand it to them, which means they have money, your name, and your photograph. Again, don't tell me it's not a FERPA violation. They would say it's not a FERPA violation as a company because that's what they have to say, legally. But they say, no, we make sure that things are secure and that we're not doing this and we're not doing that. Well, that's fine. But you don't know who is doing it. You don't know, or you do know and you don't want to say, who might be stealing it. Again, in the intermediary, right in between the process wirelessly of a photo being taken and the photo being uploaded to a server. Not to mention, what's a parent going to do? Ask who really runs the server? What's the name of the individual who's in charge of the server, who oversees all of the pictures of these minors with their names affiliated with them and the geographic location of where they live? No parent's going to ask that question. But they're starting to ask now. It's taken a long time, but it's finally being asked now. And I'll get to that in just a little bit. Here's a timeline, however, of relevant events. In 2018, Jeffrey Epstein again convicted in Florida for soliciting minors. That's the least of what he did. From 2012 to 2017, billionaire investor Leon Black, CEO and co-founder of Apollo Global Management, pays Epstein large sums for tax/financial advisory work. I'm sure he did. That's what they call child sex trafficking. Tax financial advisory work. It says these payments occur after Epstein's conviction, which later becomes a major source of controversy. Yeah. Shutterfly in 2018 acquires Lifetouch, the school photography company, for $825 million. At this time, Lifetouch becomes a subsidiary of Shutterfly. In 2019, Apollo Global Management acquires Shutterfly. This means Lifetouch, owned by Shutterfly, owned by Apollo. Leon Black is still CEO of Apollo at this time, so Leon Black's in charge of all of it. In 2019, Epstein is arrested on federal sex trafficking charges. Public scrutiny of anyone connected to him intensifies. In 2020 to 2021, investigators and reporting reveal the scale of Leon Black's payments to Epstein. An independent review is conducted, and Leon Black resigns as CEO and chairman of Apollo in 2021. In 2022 to 2025, ongoing document releases exist, court filings. Media coverage continues to mention people who had financial dealings with Epstein, including Leon Black. Parents and commentators notice that school photography company, Lifetouch, is ultimately owned by the same firm Black led. And this sparks public concern and online discussion despite no evidence of wrongdoing by Lifetouch. It simply wraps up here, and it says, because Lifetouch handles student photos, names, schools, and grade levels, and the ownership chain passes through a firm once led by someone tied financially to Epstein, people perceive a risk. Yes, it's called instincts and dot connecting. It says even though no misuse has been shown. This is a trust and optics issue, not a documented criminal link. Then ask yourself the following. If yearbooks are so important, and people view owning one as being some rite of passage, and people believe that a boatload of minors have to exist in one book and pictures of all of them, again, their sporting events, cheerleading, all of that stuff, which some might say is sexually explicit to an extent, certainly today. Why is it that a local photographer isn't the one handling it? Why is it that you can't have your photography teacher within your school handle it? Why is it that a school district feels the need to pay out tens of thousands of dollars every single year to have an outside company come in and engage in this service where all of these pictures are not just put on a yearbook and then printed once and then repeatedly printed just within the yearbook, but digital photographs are taken and then stored somewhere else permanently? And then, of course, they have no idea where they go after that. Are they sold to someone? Remember me bringing up all the ransomware stuff that goes on in the field of education? Remember all of that? How it's very easy for an education company, regardless of what service they allegedly sell, even though we know what they're really selling, they're selling data because they're always harvesting data. So if a particular technology company in the field of education who sells their wares to, again, schools and school districts, has children's data from said school district on their servers, they'll say something like, we've experienced a ransomware attack, which means our servers have been hacked into. We don't think anything's bad has happened, but what we're going to do is we're going to be forced to pay off these people so that we make sure that they don't do anything bad with your information. Trust us, we'll handle it from here. All that turns into is money laundering to then trade children's data, minors, digital data, again, face, address, personal information, search history, whatever, to an outside party. All under the guise of, whoops-a-daisy, we experienced a ransomware attack. And then you'd have to ask yourself the question, of all of those so-called ransomware attacks, which I think many of them, again, are fake because they're designed to money launder and sell personal data, how many of them are actually investigated by real cybersecurity detectives to actually find out if the accusation that's being made is actually accurate or not? Many of these companies come right out at the forefront and they say, don't worry, we are investigating. Well, are you law enforcement? Probably not. You're coders. You're server managers. You claim to be, again, the heads of these technology companies, which means who's to say that you're not engaging in money laundering and data harvesting for the purposes of selling that information to a third party under the hoax of it being a ransomware attack, just to distract people? Where's the real criminal investigation? In many cases, there never is one. Police never even touch these with a 10-foot pole. They're too busy writing traffic tickets. Now, as a result of this Lifetouch discussion that certainly happened last week, there are numerous schools across the United States that are canceling their contracts with Lifetouch, which they should. Again, if there's smoke, there's fire. And you would think that these environments would want to distance themselves from such companies that have such affiliations. But it's a little difficult when you've got students and staff members screaming for ICE agents to go away because, we don't care about those kids, but whatever, we only care about the ones within our building. Again, it's Crazy Town. And they're all the mayor of Crazy Town. But here's a brief little audio clip from a local news outlet. This is Fox 51 I'm sorry, it's NBC, KETK.com. It is titled, 7 East Texas Schools Cut Ties with Lifetouch Amid Epstein Claims. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Several East Texas school districts are re-examining their partnership with Lifetouch Photos. The company is best known for taking photos of millions of children every year for School Picture Day. The former CEO, who now owns the parent company of Lifetouch, is currently facing allegations that he helped finance Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking operation. Now, East Texas school districts, including Malakoff, Kemp, Van, and Winsboro, have decided to end their partnership with Lifetouch. School administrators all citing student privacy and safety concerns as a reason for canceling their services. Amid this week's fallout, the current Lifetouch CEO released this statement saying images of students are safeguarded with no exceptions and that Lifetouch does not and never has provided student images to third parties.
Again, what are they going to do? Admit it? Are they going to be like, yeah, we give, we put all the pictures on a thumb drive and then we give them to Leon Black and then he gives them to somebody else and then that person gives them to somebody else. And then before you know it, they're on Ghislaine Maxwell's submarine on their way to, Epstein Island. They're not going to say any of that. They're not going to say any of that. And again, you don't have to have knowledgeable people in the company even thinking that that kind of a thing is even possible. You just have to have one person on the outside with access. That's it. It's that simple. This entire thing, again, could have been avoided by simply having local school districts and making it district policy that local school districts use and acquire a local professional photographer. And then you sign a contract where it clearly says, if any of these pictures are digitized, you will be deleting them. Or, heaven forbid, again, it's a crazy idea, but that school districts just handle it themselves. That they just bring in whoever it is that, again, runs the yearbook, which is usually a school employee. In the building where I worked, again, it was, at least in the high school where I worked, it was she was a special ed teacher who was also a union rep who was also the cheerleading coach. I mean, she was the one who ran the yearbook. With a couple of help, with some help from a couple other people. So what? Do they not own a camera? Can the school district not buy a camera? And then you put the pictures of everybody on a thumb drive and you just take the photographs. And then again, if you want to send them off to a photograph printing company, then you do that and then you get the photographs back. I mean, it just seems like there's another way to do it. I understand that they would say, well, that's a lot of work and we don't want to have to deal with it and whatever else. This should prove to people that they don't give a shit about safety because they're not thinking 2 moves ahead. They can't even see their own hand in front of their face. I mean, that's how little and what a lack of foresight they have. They're just not thinking, which is exactly why they always say that they're proactive. They're clearly not. This is a 100% reactive move that takes place among these school districts, certainly now. I mean, imagine that. They couldn't see this coming. Epstein files, CEO of the photograph company that takes pictures for your yearbooks every single year, financing child trafficking. That's, it's 2-3 degrees of them not being able to think about any of that. They couldn't even imagine any of that. But it makes perfect sense, does it not? Where do predators go? Where the prey exists. And where's the prey? Where does underage prey exist? We know the answer to that question. Now, here's an article from 3 years ago. 3 years ago, NBC News. Lawsuit alleges billionaire Leon Black raped autistic teen at Epstein's townhouse. An attorney for Black has denied the allegations, calling them frivolous and sanctionable. Again, quite a specific allegation for quite a specific individual. But I do want to say this, again, in all fairness, and I'm not going to try to be fair with the American school system because why bother? They're criminal organizations. But I will say that based on statistics, certainly by the DOJ, if they can be believed and all of that can be believed, there's less than 100 abductions in or around school of school-aged minors. So they're typically not kidnapped at school. And they're typically not, again, kidnapped on school grounds or close to school grounds. It's not that it doesn't happen. It does. It's just not as frequent as one might necessarily think. Certainly given the environment, of course, recess, being outside, limited supervision. Somebody showing up to a school building pretending to be a parent when they're not, snatching a kid or, whatever else. A lot of kidnappings, of course, always take place, but they're more likely to happen further away from the actual school environment, like a bus stop, a parking lot, things of that nature. So, again, I think this entire Lifetouch thing has far more to do with data harvesting. And then, of course, the false selling of personal information of minors, specifically their images, names, locations, etc., for the purpose of acquiring money. And then, of course, creating a digital twin, being able to track that child, again, track their search history, track, again, their geographic location, all of it. And then just creating these online profiles that exist for individual students. It doesn't help that more students, of course, are walking around with wireless devices and cell phones with personal IP addresses and everything else. None of that's good. But, it doesn't help when no one even thinks about the possible illegality or illegal connections between a company that they readily rely on consistently entering their environments to do a particular task, only to then find out, well, there's some nefarious connections, so now we better hit the panic button. Again, no one's going to convince me the school environment is proactive. They're always reactive, always have been. They just like hearing themselves say they're proactive. So it's not just 7 school districts in Texas. It's happening all over the place, which is a good thing. Again, you'd save a copious amount of money if you just had somebody local do it who was responsible, who signed a contract, knew exactly what they were doing, didn't violate FERPA. Or you could be even more responsible and just get rid of the stupid practice of yearbooks altogether. How about you just do that? Again, if you want a picture of yourself, have your family member pull out their cell phone and take a picture of you. It's not difficult. Why are we still engaging in this archaic practice and tradition, so to speak, that really no one gives a shit about? So, yeah. That's my 2 cents on the whole thing. Again, does it go deeper than that? Most certainly it does. But that's where, again, only the people engaging in the illegality would know the ins and outs. I would just simply go back again to the very thing that I said at the very start. Certainly, again, from a technological standpoint, there's no one keeping anybody from snatching an image that is being transferred wirelessly from the moment that the picture is taken to making its way to a cloud server, which is just someone else's computer. Accessing that information and someone being given permission to access that information who has nefarious motives or is paid to access that information and then do something with it for nefarious reasons, that's beyond the realm of a possibility. But again, when you send your kids to government, you get government prizes. And pedophilia is always a government prize. And child sex trafficking is unfortunately one as well. Now, I have 2 more stories here. One is a follow-up that AJ Gochik sent my way, and he was the original individual to send me this first story, and I read through it back when he first sent it to me, and I brought it up on the show. And then I want to end with a piece of footage from a local news outlet in Columbus having to do with ICE, because you're not going to believe where ICE has actually set up a detention center and a prosecution center. But anyway, regarding this was from the Palo Alto Daily Post, and it was titled, "Updated, School district agrees to pay $3.25 million to teacher accused of unsubstantiated rape allegations. Now, the teacher's name is Peter Colombo, who was a middle school teacher, I believe, and if memory serves, he was a phys ed teacher. I could have his position wrong, but either way, he worked in this Palo Alto school district for 27 years. And he was under investigation over the last number of years here, where a previous female victim basically said that many years ago when she was younger, more than 20 years previously, that he raped her in the locker room. Again, terrible allegation, clearly. And apparently there was some evidence that this had actually happened. Again, direct specific testimony from the victim, victim's family, victim's friends, etc., etc. This brings up, again, an old point I've made, certainly regarding Title IX investigations in the town where I live regarding the case of Jason Mers, which is if you are assaulted and you do not go to the police immediately, and you wait numerous years with every passing day that you are not filing a police report against the individual who engaged in the crime and victimized you, then you're going to be taken less seriously. I mean, again, this is one of the reasons, unfortunately, why adults will prey on minors, because they threaten minors. And they threaten them to keep their mouths shut. And this is what they do. And many minors, of course, adhere to that because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to leave the school environment, even though a horrible thing has happened within it, and 1,000 other things. But as a result of all of this 7-figure settlement now has been dished out by the school district because this Colombo guy, again, is basically saying that they suspended him without due process. They suspended him unjustly. And a number of other things. But again, there was ample evidence that it in fact occurred. Problem is it was 20 years ago. But here's AJ's breakdown of this in a text message to me. He said the following. He said, this piece of shit pedo got a 7-figure settlement. A woman seeking absolutely no financial gain spoke up 20 years later that PE teacher Colombo raped her in the middle school bathroom. Middle school gym locker. She didn't file a lawsuit or anything like that. She informed the school about him. Her sister saved emails from 2009 about the incident. Her friends and ex-boyfriend recalled her describing the rape in detail. Her life was fucked up after that. Colombo has like 10 misdemeanor convictions, including several DUIs, and we don't know how many were initially felony charges pled down to misdemeanors. And one libtard Jew had the nerve to state in the comments section, Pete had no history of violence. AJ went on and said he's the guy who, when the schools opened back up in 2021 with mask requirements, he didn't always wear a mask, which I would normally praise. But one day at school, when he wasn't masking, he saw a student who wasn't either, yelled at the student and pulled him into an empty room, and the student looked distressed afterwards. What an asshole, he won't mask himself while yelling and reprimanding students who also don't want to mask. His lawsuit was dismissed twice, but the lawyers kept amending the complaint to find some claims that would survive a motion to dismiss. After that, the school settled with him. Again, $3.2 million. So sadly, in this case, it sounds like you've got a rapist who's clearly a pedophile, who's worked in the school district for 27 years and apparently still works there, even as a multimillionaire. I don't know why he would at this stage of the game. But this is a perfect example of what happens when you don't go to the police. That this many years can pass and the bad guy, seemingly, can basically not only get off, but he can get away with a copious amount of money, thereby re-victimizing the victim yet again with his face and all of this money now, of course, out in the headlines. It's disgusting. But again, this is the world that we live in. The right thing isn't always going to happen, And if you don't know what the right thing is, and you aren't teaching children what the right thing is, then they'll be victimized. And if they don't tell you quickly, and you don't raise them to tell you immediately when something terrible happens, well, then the perpetrator themselves could end up wealthy, monetarily anyway, but he won't escape God. That's the best part about all of it. He's not going to escape the real judgment at the end of the day. So, again, if he did it, he'll burn in hell, because eventually that money's going to wash up and you can't take money with you where he's going. It just won't last. So, I'm going to end with this. Speaking of things that are moving in a good direction, though, on the opposite side of that spectrum, Westerville, Ohio. Of all of the towns, ladies and gentlemen, in Ohio, the one that I've been covering with regularity here on the show happens to be the one that is going to have a massive ICE legal office in it to basically fast-track deportations and the entire legal process for illegal aliens. Just so happens it's going to be located in Westerville, Ohio. This is from their local news outlet, WTRF.com. Give this a listen in 3, 2, 1.
Temporary protected status for Somali immigrants.
It comes after a renewed focus on alleged fraud in Minnesota.
The Trump administration is ending temporary protected status for Somali immigrants.
It comes after a renewed focus on alleged fraud in Minnesota, where many of the people targeted were citizens of Somali descent. There are more than 60,000 Somali immigrants living here in Columbus. It's the second largest Somali population in the country, just behind Minneapolis. It's unclear how many in central Ohio are under those TPS. The immigration status protects people who fled dangerous situations.
A local immigration lawyer says several of his Somali clients do not have any options outside of TPS.
It's disheartening with the lack of due process and just kind of pushing people through the system, kind of the campaign of intimidation that a lot of my clients just have kind of lost hope.
The Trump administration says all Somali immigrants under that temporary protection status must leave the country by March 17th.
An emergency meeting on the south side of Columbus tonight called for action against ICE as fears over immigration enforcement continue in central Ohio.
Meantime, immigration advocates say the ending of temporary protected status for Somali immigrants could further target an already vulnerable community. NBC4 Samantha Bender has more on the meeting and a reaction from a local Somali resident.
The Columbus branch of the Party for Socialism and Liberation held the Stop ICE Terror mass meeting tonight, with organizers saying it's about preparation, power of the people, and what comes next for immigrant communities.
Thank you.
Community members filled the Columbus Liberation Center as speakers discussed pushing back against ICE enforcement through collective action.
We have strength in numbers, and that's something that's really important, and something that we've seen with our past action is the hundreds and thousands of Columbus residents who have come out to our actions.
The meeting comes less than a week after an ICE officer in Minneapolis shot and killed a 37-year-old woman.
I'm an Afghanistan war veteran. I'm seeing a lot of the same tactics that the Taliban were using in Afghanistan being used by ICE here in our own streets. And we were always told the Great Line, we're fighting them over there, so we don't have to fight them over here. And yet they're here now.
Organizers laid out plans for walkouts, strikes, and mass demonstrations in the coming weeks.
We are calling a strike on January 20th. So students and workers across Columbus are going to be walking out, and then there will be an action at the State House.
And earlier today, President Trump confirmed he's ending temporary protected status for Somali residents.
To revoke it during a time when many in our country are suffering, I think is just cruel.
Anisa Liban, a Somali American and an advocate for immigrants, says the decision feels like an intentional and coordinated attack.
I think the reason the Somali community in particular is being targeted is that if you look at all the ethnic groups in the United States, there are only a handful that really fit into these buckets, that can be Black, that can be Muslim, that can be immigrant. And Somalis really check all those boxes.
Liban says she worries the decision will further embolden agencies like ICE to incite fear among the Somali community, regardless of legal status. Local for you, I'm Samantha Bender, NBC4.
Did you catch that? Anisa Liban, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, that Anisa Liban, the same Somali woman who's the fraud who laundered money from Minneapolis, Seattle, Washington for her school board campaign for Westerville, Ohio school board to the tune of $161,000 to then only have half of it magically disappear while cooking the books and deleting all of her Minnesota donations that she received. She's the one being interviewed by this NBC, again, sympathetic news outlet. They're only coming after the Browns, and that's the only reason why ICE is here. No, they're not. They're coming after illegal aliens, child traffickers, and criminals, including murderers. It just so happens the vast majority are illegal and brown. And what are they doing? Defending them. And then distracting people. Well, they're only targeting us, and this is horrible, and this is what the Taliban does. The irony. Again, the walls are closing in here on Anisa Liban and Somalis everywhere, specifically her. Westerville is now going to have the largest ICE intake center, certainly for prosecutions, that exists in the entire nation, and it's in her town. Is that an accident? Of all the towns to pick, of all the people I've covered on the show here, she happens to be the one where the feds are going to show up in droves. If I was her, I'd be shitting my pants. She's in the Star Wars trash compactor. There's no escaping. R2-D2 isn't going to save her from this one. She's surrounded now. Here's what the article says briefly. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is expanding its Central Ohio presence, appearing to open a new legal office in Westerville. According to leasing documents, the General Service Administration began leasing a second office in Westerville in October. The GSA manages things like leases and technology for other federal departments. The lease agreement came weeks after the GSA began accepting proposals for office space in Columbus and 18 other cities to support law enforcement operations. According to federal lease records, the U.S. government began leasing 774 Park Meadow Road in Westerville, on October 30th. The lease will expire October 29th of 2030 at $257,758 per year. On Tuesday, Wired reported the lease will be used by the Office of the Principal Legal Advisor, OPLA, the largest legal department under ICE. Google Maps also reflects that 774 Park Meadow Road is an OPLA office. Wired reported it had seen ICE documents confirming OPLA will move into Westerville under the lease. In September, GSA launched a lease proposal for law enforcement expansions in Columbus, but has not associated any contract awards with the request. The September leasing appears to be the only GSA posting for office space in Columbus since 2023. County records show that 774 Park Meadow Road underwent contracted improvement work for GSA around October 30th. The facility is owned by Nationwide Realty Investors and also houses Adena Corporation and Concord Counseling Services offices. It says the location is along the same street as Westerville's current ICE office, located at 675 Brooks Edge Boulevard. If OPLA moves in, the two offices will serve different functions. OPLA's office represent ICE and the Department of Homeland Security in deportation hearings. The existing Westerville ICE office is a regional field office acting as a local command center for ICE operations. ICE and DHS did not respond to NBC's 4 requests for comment. Boom. I'd get on my camel and I'd head out of town if I was Anisa Liban. If I was a Somali in Westerville or Columbus, I'd go back to the sandbox I came from. Because you're about to get your ass tossed out. Now, Anisa Liban is a citizen, allegedly, if that's her real name. But once they find out again, or even some of these ICE agents pinch some of those Somalis, I bet they give up Anisa Liban. I would. Wouldn't you? I'd squeal like a pig. These people eat each other alive. They do it for fun in their own stupid home country anyway, but when it comes to our legal system over here, if it really cracks down the way that it's supposed to, certainly the feds, these people will squeal on each other like nobody's business. I love it. Her days are numbered. It's not a matter of if, it's only a matter of when. And I can't wait, and I'll be the first to bring it to you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening as always. Always going to be another busy week, I guarantee it. And with that said, thanks for listening as always. I'll catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.